Now I'll break down 17's neutral, starting from round start. For round start, 17 lacks prominent round start options that can immediately swing the battle in his favor, due to his short range. The most reliable option would be to create space and play the neutral out, either by backdashing or super jumping. In the long range, 17's options are relatively underwhelming, as his full screen presence is lacking. His 5S is his only immediately available projectile. Depending on the matchup, you may use more or less blasts. Throwing out one or two of them is generally low risk, but take note of how your opponent moves. One moon jump can lead to a full punish if done correctly, so be careful. When dealing with projectile-heavy characters like Baby, or slow long-range assists, capitalize off of their own projectiles using finishing driver into reverse gear in order to passively gain meter. The medium version of finishing driver can be used to punish certain beams, however the timing is strict. Against more linear space control, you can use a moon jump, or his acrobatic assault, in order to clear the gap through the air. Just be cautious to not get anti-aired. Acrobatic assault is a tricky way to bypass neutral from a range. The higher 17 is when he leaps off the wall, the more shallow his descent becomes. Use the super jump, then follow up with the acrobatic assault that sends him to the wall behind him, to then aggressively approach through the air. During the leap, you can use JS, heavy fake out, or super dash to throw off your opponent's response. Don't be too predictable with your aerial options and stay loose. If you have it available, you can use Power Blitz to counter your enemy's projectiles, or attempt to lock them down. Due to the trajectory of Power Blitz, it's more likely to land if you are either horizontally parallel to your opponent, or just slightly higher than them. Note that Power Blitz doesn't jail airborne enemies to the ground on block, so best aim it when they're close to the floor. Against retreating enemies, you can close the gap with the heavy version of XL Driver. Because of its anti-airing capabilities, you don't have to worry about falling normals or an opportunistic super dash from your opponent. If their response is late or they try to protect themselves with an assist, use heavy reverse gear to protect yourself. Using beam or beam-like assists in combination with these tools greatly strengthen these options. From the mid-range, you can use a dash-boosted 3H to close the gap. Medium XL Driver and light XL Driver into medium top gear can clear a great distance and start your offense. If the driver starters whiff, you can analyze the situation and use whatever follow-up you deem appropriate. You can use top gear and low gear to interrupt assists, or use finishing driver or reverse gear to avoid or protect yourself against projectiles or assists. If your opponent seems to be turtling, you can use a deep dash into a button to take advantage of their stagnancy. You can close the gap with dash blocking as well. If you find yourself airborne, you can use JS to intercept aggressive movement below you. On hit or block, you can either super dash, follow up with the medium or heavy versions of second gear, or use heavy fake out into top gear. Be sure to judge your range carefully, as on block, JS into these options will either be gapless, have a tiny gap, have a gap large enough to be interrupted, or with completely. Acrobatic assault can be used to reposition yourself, or to evade ground attacks and retaliate from an angle. If they super dash in response late, you can use barrier explosion, or use heavy fast fall into reverse gear to punish. It's also possible to be chased by super dash during your travel to the wall. If you touch the wall, immediately use barrier explosion. Aerial fake out can be used to throw your opponent off, especially if they're expecting acrobatic assault. If they super dash in response, you can use reverse gear or the drivers to punish. If your opponent is prone to jumping in this range, chase them down with a super dash. Or you can attempt to air with JM. If you manage to catch them blocking with a JM, you can staircase them to the ground using J236L to continue your offense. If done right, this can be gapless, or at the least have a 1-frame gap. In the close range, 5M, 3H, 5S into 3H, air dash into JM, and Light XL Driver can be used reliably to close the gap and start offense, though be sure to note your enemy's options in those ranges too. If you find yourself directly above your opponent, you can use Light Second Gear to quickly strike below, or throw off their anti-air timing with a Super Dash or Fake Out. If your enemy is directly above you, you can use 2H into Super Dash to catch them. This will jail aerial opponents on block. Using more standard options like Super Dash or air-to-airing with JL is also advised.